Chapter 6. Diane Lane came to Harvey's desk and handed him a sheaf of papers. "These are his known acquaintances, in order by last date of contact. The most recent was 2 days ago, when he contacted the first 8 names on the list." Harvey took the list, skipped to the last page, and noted that the last entry was number 204. "That's a lot to get through. Let's take the top 8 and hand the remainder over to the local police," he told her. "My thought exactly. I've been in touch with Scotland Yard and they're disseminating the list to all local forces as we speak." She handed Harvey a thick file. "These are police reports regarding the missing boys. When we speak to Gray's contacts, we need to ascertain their whereabouts at the times the boys disappeared." "Good work, Diane. Let's go see what Gray's mates have to say." "You take these 3, Harvey said, circling 3 names. "I'll take these 2, and Hammett can have numbers 3, 5 and 6. Before we go, get onto GCHQ. Ask them to monitor all calls and emails in and out for the top 10 names on the list." As if on cue, Farsi arrived and made a beeline for Harvey's desk. "I brought the contractor in to speak to Gerald. Much of what he told me went over my head, and I thought it best to let him talk to someone who also spoke geek. From what I did understand, a lot of the stuff he asked for was pretty routine, although Gray had some specifications for communicating with a website in Joburg." "Yeah, we already made the South African connection. Gerald's working on it." Farsi began to remove his jacket, but Harvey stopped him. "We've got a couple of his old army buddies to visit." He jotted down the names and addresses and handed them to Farsi, along with the police reports. "Make a note of the dates and times the boys disappeared and see if you can tie any of Gray's friends to the hostages." As an afterthought, he asked, "What of the security firm?" "They emailed his order over, along with basic descriptions, but they can't go too deep into capabilities and weaknesses, as they are only distributors. We'll need to go to the manufacturers for those, and I don't think it's going to be easy at this time on a Sunday." "Hand it over to Gerald's team. They must have some kind of technical support service, and if they don't get any joy there, they should go direct to the CEO. We need to know what we're up against, and what we can do to get round his defences." Farsi nodded his understanding, and Harvey stood up and grabbed his jacket. "Let's go rattle some cages." The beeping of the motion sensor panel heralded the arrival of the authorities. Gray looked at the sensor's designation, and it told him the area was covered by camera 12, so he switched to the bank of monitors and maximised the view for that camera. There had been several false alarms earlier in the day, caused by local wildlife, but what he saw on the screen was no bunny rabbit. 2 figures dressed in black snaked through the grass 270 yards from the side of the building, heading towards the cover of a pile of rubble left by the demolition of an old outbuilding. The remaining wall, which stood barely 3 feet high, offered the best cover available around the main building, and it was for this reason that Gray had deployed a couple of microphones. One was hidden in the rubble to the side of the wall, and the other was embedded in the wall itself. Gray had drilled through the mortar from the side facing the building, using a drill bit measured to the thickness of the wall minus 3 millimeters, so it hadn't broken through the other side of the mortar. In about 20 minutes the 2 figures would arrive at the wall, and he would see whether the microphones functioned as well in the rain as they did in the dry conditions when he had tested them. Sergeant Dave Williams of the Metropolitan Police's Counter-Terrorism Command, better known as SO-15, reached the wall moments before Officer Ben Knightley. He used his binoculars to scan the area between his location and the building, and didn't like what he saw. "It's just like they said. This guy knows how to set a perimeter. We've got shorter grass for about 70 yards, then open ground for another 30 or 40. I say open, but I can see barbed wire and mounds everywhere. There's no way we get across there in a hurry." Williams scanned the front of the building. "We've got 3 cameras, sweeping in a 160-degree arc. Wait. Shit. One is static, looking straight at us. He knows we're here." "Do we try another approach?" Knightley asked. "Hang on." Williams reached for his thermal imaging camera to see if he could detect any heat sources in the building, but he was met with a wall of white blobs, dancing around in a psychedelic waltz. "He's got some kind of disruption system heating every wall. I can't see a thing in there. Now what?" "We report in and wait for instructions." Gray watched their approach on the camera and heard every word they said. He couldn't hear the response from their commanders, but at least they appreciated the effort that had gone into his defences. More importantly, the thermal sheets lining the walls worked. If they couldn't see into the room with heat-detecting equipment, they were virtually blind, adding more uncertainty to the chances of a forced entry succeeding. As a security consultant, Gray was up to date on all the latest gadgets, and this gave him the edge when it came to defeating SO-15. He had searched the internet for the most state-of-the-art devices that could be used against him, and then trawled through Freedom of Information documents to see what equipment was available to the various police forces. Once he knew which thermal imaging camera SO-15 would be likely to deploy, defeating it was relatively easy. The background work had certainly paid off. He turned his attention to his laptop, and after watching the vote count tick over the 1,000,000 mark, he folded his arms and lay back in the chair. The hypnotic hum of the diesel generator helped him to fall asleep. If the authorities decided to launch an attack, operational sense dictated that it would most likely come in the middle of the night, and he planned to be wide awake for it. Harvey peered through the front window of the terrace house, but saw no sign of life. He returned to the door and rang the bell again, but after having drawn a blank at the first suspect's home, he knew he was wasting his time here too.
"He's not in,"
a voice said. It belonged to Tristram Barker-Fink's next-door neighbour, a woman in her 60s who stood in her doorway, arms folded and a cigarette dangling from her lips. "Do you know where he went?" Harvey asked.
"You the police?"
she asked, the cigarette bobbing with every word. "No, I'm an old friend of Triss. We were in the army together. I was hoping to catch up with him while I'm in town on business."
"I think he went on holiday. He left last week with an old, hasn't been back since."
"Did he say where he was going?" Harvey asked, praying that the old cow was as nosy as he hoped.
"No idea, he just left. He doesn't talk much, that one, and only has men round."
She left the statement hanging, letting Harvey come to his own conclusions. He realised that he wasn't going to get much from this homophobe, so he told her he would try next time he was in town and returned to his car. Once inside, he called Hamad Farsi. "Get anything?" he asked him. "Len Smart wasn't home, but Carl Levine's wife said he went on a job last week. He told her it was a 2-week bodyguard assignment for a visiting dignitary, and she has no reason to doubt him, as that's how he earns his living." "OK, check that out with Gray's old company. See if Levine is still on their books. If he isn't, get onto all the security firms in the area to see who he's signed up with." Harvey hung up, then called Diane Lane. "What news?" he asked. "No joy. I've been to all 3 properties and none of them are there. I got no answer from Paul Bennett, and Jeff Campbell's wife said he was on an assignment. Same with Colin Avery." "Both 2-week assignments for visiting dignitaries by any chance?" Harvey asked. "Those exact words," Lane confirmed. "Then these are our guys. 1 or 2 being away is possible, but all 8? I don't think so. Pass their names to Special Branch and tell them it's a priority." We need to find these guys. And quick. Tom Gray woke after 40 minutes and checked his monitors. The two men were still lying behind the wall, but their command structure had moved in, setting up 3 vehicles in the lane that ran parallel to the building, 200 yards from the rear wall. Gray guessed they had closed the lane to prevent the press and members of the public from getting too close. They had also set up a perimeter around the area, with men stationed 100 feet apart and looking out, rather than towards the building. Not only did this suit the authorities by keeping nosy civilians and the media at arm's length, it also made life easier for him by preventing those same people setting off his motion sensors every 2 minutes. He turned his attention to the TV and caught the tail end of the 5 o'clock news. Greater Manchester Police held a press conference where Simon Arkin's mother made an impassioned plea for his release.
I am asking the people of England to vote for my son's freedom. Yes, he may have a criminal record, but he has been to court and he has been punished.
Gray watched as she struggled to compose herself until she gave up and burst into tears.
I just want my boy back.
The Chief Inspector reiterated her plea for the population to do the decent thing before the feed cut back to the studio. Gray picked up his mobile phone and dialed a preset number. The BBC news anchor had just finished reading the headlines at 6 o'clock when she paused to listen to the message in her earpiece.
I'm told we now have Tom Gray from the Justice for Britain website on the phone. Mr. Gray, thank you for speaking to us today.
Hello, Charlene.
Mr. Gray, I imagine the first question the viewers would be asking is, why exactly are you doing this?
You know, a few people have asked me that today. My answer is to ensure that when criminals are caught, they are punished.
But as we have just heard from Mrs. Arkin, her son was caught and he has been punished. We also have a justice system that ensures people are punished appropriately. Why do you think we need to change the current system?
I think it needs to change because the word punishment is being used without anyone properly interpreting the definition. Punishment means any change in a human's surroundings that occurs after a given behaviour or response that reduces the likelihood of that behaviour occurring again in the future. This means that to punish someone is to make them think twice about doing it again. As you can see from the list of convictions on the website, none of the criminals I'm holding have had any kind of sentence that made them think twice. Take Stuart Boyle, for instance. After killing my son, he spent less than 8 months in custody. If that was meant to teach him a lesson, it failed badly, because he has been convicted of car theft 3 times since his release.
But surely killing him is a bit extreme. We don't even have the death penalty for murder.
Well, that is what this week is all about. Is it too extreme? Or has he shown that his only purpose in life is to cause misery to others? If his only contribution to our society is going to be stealing other people's hard-earned possessions, should we have to put up with that? Anyway, I am not the one to decide if he lives or dies. It is the choice of the people. If the people think he should be set free, he will be set free. If they think he should die, he will die.
Mr. Gray, it sounds like you were trying to deflect the blame away from yourself and onto the people of this country. But the fact remains that it will be you that pulls the trigger, as it were.
I am not trying to shift the blame, Charlene. If I kill any of these boys, then I will be guilty of murder. Plain and simple.
What do you say to suggestions that anyone who votes for the boys to die is an accessory to that murder?
I heard that idea, and I think it is ludicrous. Something thought up by the government to dissuade people from voting. If 20 million people vote for Simon Arkin to die, what are the government going to do to them? Imprison them all? Fine them all? Every single case would have to go to court, and that would cripple the judicial system that everyone suddenly seems to cherish.
What is your suggestion for dealing with repeat offenders, Mr. Gray? Do you think they should all be killed?
Actually, Charlene, that's what I called about. The guests you have had on this show seem to think that my only objective is to kill these 5 people. If that were the case, they would all be dead by now. What I really want is to get the people of Britain, and more importantly the government, thinking about introducing punishments that will eradicate recidivism. If your viewers go to the website, they will find a new link that says Justice Bill at the top of the page. If they click this link, they will see my recommendations and will be able to vote as to whether they support it or are against it.
The anchor paused a moment as voices passed on the next question. What recommendations are you making, Mr. Gray?
First of all, no more hiding behind the Human Rights Act. When a crime is committed, someone's human rights have been violated. The person who commits that crime should have his human rights revoked. Secondly, the reintroduction of corporal punishment for second offences. First offences can be dealt with as they currently are, but if someone reoffends, they will be birched. Next, repeat offenders will be fined the amount in police man-hours it costs to bring them to justice. This will mean we can afford more police on the streets.
Gray took a swig of water as he scanned his CCTV monitors.
For third offences, conscription. Criminals will be drafted into a special regiment in the army and paid minimum wage with food and board deducted at source. From their remaining salary, they will be given 30%, and the rest will go towards paying for the police time it took to bring them to justice. On top of that, they will pay compensation to their victims. Finally, they will pay £3,000 towards the cost of forming the new regiment. Once these debts have been paid off, they will spend a further 5 years in the army on normal salary.
While Gray was reciting his list, the anchor was receiving yet more instructions from her producer.
Mr. Gray, what if a second offender cannot pay the amount you are suggesting?
Then they are conscripted.
And what if they don't cooperate once they are conscripted? What if they refuse to follow the army regiment?
Then they are sent to prison for as long as it would have taken to pay off their financial debt, plus 10 years. And when I say prison, I mean a real prison, not the cosy hotels we currently have. There are more details of my idea of prisons on the website.
So, what about...
Sorry, Charlene, but I've said my piece for today. I will call again tomorrow after the government has given its assessment on my suggestions.
Gray hung up, satisfied that he had handled himself well. He had faced enemy fire, but that was nothing compared to a phone call with a few million eavesdroppers. With the time approaching 6:30 in the evening, he checked the number of votes cast. There were almost 4 million, and it wasn't looking good for Simon Arkin. Chapter 7. John Hammond walked past Harvey's desk and gestured for him to follow. They headed for Gerald Small's office, where they found him deep in conversation with the contractor. "Gerald, what's the latest?" Hammond asked. "Alan here has been through the site with me and confirms that there are no booby traps. However, the results aren't counted here. When Gray clicks a button, the website speaks to the South African web service and it sends back the 2 counts." "That's right," the contractor said. "Gray told me that he'd commissioned other software in Joburg, and all I had to do was send the IP addresses to his email address when the site first kicked off to get the votes from this web service." "Would it be possible to alter this code to change the results in our favour?" Hammond asked Small. "Sure, that would only take 1 line of code. However, he gave us easy access to this code, knowing that we would be able to alter it. My guess is that he has other software, and this website is just to test us to see if we interfere with it. I doubt that he is relying on the results this website will display." Hammond thanked the contractor for his time and asked one of the techies to show him out, then asked Small about the other software. "That," Small said, "remains a mystery. We got in touch with the company he paid the 50 grand to, but they were simply instructed to source a developer and pass the details on to Gray. They did just that and got 5 grand for their trouble. We tried contacting the guy they commissioned, but there was no reply. So we tried the airlines and found out he boarded a plane for Manila 2 days ago, due to return in 3 weeks' time. The ticket was purchased last week."
"Which means we have no idea what traps he has in place for us," Harvey guessed.
"Exactly," Small confirmed. "We're blind. Once the emails get to his inbox, we have no idea what he is doing with them."
"Then we go with the first choice," Hammond said. "Intercept the emails before he gets them, and change the odds in our favour. Do it now. We have less than an hour before voting closes."
Small had everything prepared, and with a few keystrokes he announced it done. "Every second and third email with die in the body will now be changed to live," he announced.
"Why second and third?" Harvey asked.
"If we only do the second," Small explained, "the first and second votes will simply cancel each other out, and we will be relying on people to send in freedom votes. This way, for every 3 death votes, we turn them into 1 net freedom vote. If he is watching the figures in real time, he will still see death votes coming in, but there will be a surge in freedom votes. He will hopefully put it down to the mother's plea."
"OK," Hammond said. "While we're waiting for the results, check with the Met and find out how they're doing with the search for the device."
Harvey nodded, and on his way to his desk, he stopped off at Farsi's station.
"Anything in the boys' reports?" he asked. "There were 2 cases where the kid who was abducted was with his mates. I think we should get them in and show them some mugshots of our suspects." "Good idea. Go for it."
Harvey saw Hammond heading for his office and stopped him to explain their plan.
"That could be very useful," Hammond agreed. "Gray has no family, so if we can implicate his old army buddies, we might have some leverage. He must have some allegiance to them, and they to him, so if we can pin the abductions on them, we might be able to convince him to end this."
Harvey saw what Hammond was thinking.
"We can tell Gray they will get immunity from prosecution if he gives himself up. Otherwise, we charge him with kidnapping, actual bodily harm, accessory to murder, and various offences under the Terrorism Act, and send them to jail for life."
"My point exactly." Harvey turned to Farsi.
"Get onto the company he sold. Tell them to send over photos of everyone on their books, past and present, and then arrange for them to be distributed to the police forces handling these cases."
Harvey was going through the incoming reports from the dozens of police forces around the country. So far, they had identified over 1,000 locations that would normally have thousands of visitors at midday on Friday. Many had already been searched and discarded, but at the current rate, there would still be over 300 to search when the deadline arrived. Shopping centres were being asked to make all their staff available for searching their own facilities, as were other venues, such as exhibition centres and museums. Despite these efforts, though, police still had to visit each site to give it the once-over before it could be declared clear. Even if all possible venues were cleared before the deadline, there was always the possibility that the device might be mobile and delivered much nearer the time, negating their efforts. The only way to be certain was to get Gray to reveal the location, but he had stopped answering his phone. In any case, he wasn't likely to give up that information readily. If they could just get a break somewhere, they might stand a chance of stopping this. But as things stood, Gray still held all the best cards. Harvey glanced at his watch and saw that the voting would close in 10 minutes. Time to visit Gerald and see how things were progressing. At Small's desk, he found the techie staring at the screen. "How's it going?" Harvey asked. The numbers are working in our favour. Around 75% of them wanted Simon dead, but that has swung our way now. That same 75% want him to be set free.
How does that affect the overall result?
That we don't know. The Exchange server is simply a relay forwarding the emails onto another server, so we don't have a history to look at.
So we just cross our fingers and hope?
Yep, that's all we can do now. Thing is, though, even if we didn't manage to do it in time to save Simon, it should save the lives of the others.
If he falls for it.
Harvey went to Hammond's office to see what he made of Gray's list of proposed law changes.
Is there anything sensible in his justice bill?
On the face of it, Hammond said, the public will probably lap this up, but some of it just isn't possible. His idea of a real jail, for starters.
What is he suggesting?
Hammond looked through the printout to find the details. All prisoners will have their own cell, and they will stay in there for 23 hours a day. Meals will be served in their cells. There will be 1 hour of exercise per day, each person in a separate compound, and no contact between prisoners whatsoever. Each prisoner will be given work to do in their cell, and if they meet their daily target, they get 8 hours pay at minimum wage, minus food and board, plus 2 hours of television. If they don't meet their daily target, they get another day added to their sentence and no pay. Once they have paid off the cost of their prosecution, they have the option of moving into the general prison population to serve their sentence, or remaining on their work schedule and taking courses to give them work opportunities on the outside. If they do this, they get extra privileges such as more TV and more exercise time, and each extra day of work takes 2 days off their sentence.
Sounds like he's got it all worked out. Does he say what kind of work they would be doing?
To start off with, they could assemble pens and other items that require little quality control. The courses will be in areas such as website design, computer maintenance, and office skills. Registered charities will be able to commission websites and get their PCs fixed and so on.
I guess he wants to revoke their human rights so that they can be forced to work.
It certainly looks like it, Hammond agreed. That and the reintroduction of the birch.
Reintroduction? I thought the birch was only used on the Isle of Man, Harvey said.
More recently, yes. But my father told me about the time he was given 6 strokes on the bare arse when he was a teenager. He was one of the last to get the birch, and the judge told him that if he had been a little older, he would probably have been given the cat-o'-nine-tails. My father said it was a very effective form of punishment, and looking back, he said it was a shame they abolished judicial corporal punishment in 1948.
Perhaps Gray has a point. When I was at school, they had the cane and the slipper, and it made you think twice.
Yes, Gray mentions that too. He claims that back in the 80s, there wasn't as much of the antisocial behaviour in schools that plagues our country today, and he thinks it's because headmasters knew how to discipline kids. These days, teachers can't even shout at their pupils without being sued by the parents.
Is he demanding that these changes are implemented before Thursday? Harvey asked.
No. Again, he wants the people to decide. He wants the government to promise to hold a referendum 1 year from now, but only if the majority of the votes through his website are for his proposals. He says that holding a referendum gives both opponents and supporters of the changes the chance to put their arguments forward.
So, they should promise him a referendum, and when it's all over they can retract.
Oh, our Mr. Gray thought of that, don't you worry. He said the government can later refuse to hold a referendum if they wish, but in doing so, they admit that they are happy to let repeat offenders back on the street time and time again. With the whole country glued to the story, and with millions of them having been victims of crime in recent years, I don't think the current administration will be very popular at the upcoming election. If they promise to hold a referendum and retract later, they will be seen to lie to the people. "It looks like Gray has it all worked out," Harvey said. "Mind you, he has had months to prepare this, and we only have days to stop him." "That's usually the case, Andrew, but criminals never think of everything. We just have to find the one flaw in his plan." Hammond rose and put on his jacket. "I'm going to grab some dinner before the main show. I'll be back before 8:30. Stepping out of the building, Hammond pulled his collar up to combat the evening chill. He could only hope that his assertion was correct, and that there was indeed a flaw in Gray's plan. In his 37 years in the service, he had been through many scrapes and overcome many adversaries, but most of the time MI5 had been aware of the threat early on and had the time and resources to deal with it. Tom Gray had turned all that on its head, putting them on the back foot from the start and leaving them very little room for manoeuvre. If there weren't a flaw in Gray's plan, if this was a no-win situation, then people were going to die, and there was nothing he could do about it.